Hello friends, Martin here and welcome to this new behind the scenes video focusing on the recently released teaser for Heroes of Bronze, which I've made entirely using Blender's real-time renderer Eevee. A few weeks ago, I actually introduced the first two behind the scenes videos, one for the trireme shot. The second one was for the marching hoplite shot. That one was actually exclusively released only on my Patreon for the Hypaspist and Hoplite patrons. Now let's have a look at this shot, another one of my favorites. Well, to be honest, they were all my favorites. Anyway, this one is actually the first one where I experimented with putting together some marching armies directly in Eevee. So let's have a look at the scene, and you can immediately see that just as it was the case with most of the shots in this teaser, this scene was made purely for this one shot angle, and I omitted everything else that's not seen in the shot. So there's not really any city behind the gates, nor is there any ground on which the hoplites could walk. It simply isn't really needed for achieving shots like these, and if you don't make some sort of difficult simulations or if you don't need many shots of the same environment from many angles, you can pretty much cheat as much as you want. I must also admit that even though it is real time when it comes to manipulating with the scene and rotating around, you can see that it's all pretty fast. However, it's nowhere near real time when I hit this play button. See? Yep, basically nothing happens. That's mostly because of the amount of detail this environment has, but also because, surprisingly enough, these rendered image sequence cards on which my little soldiers are placed are quite taxing for your machine's performance. That's probably because they're all 2K in size, and when they are put together with alpha information and everything, it slows down the computer quite a bit. That's actually going to be one of my future goals, to find out the fastest Eevee solution for rendering soldiers on cards, with being able to see the scenes in as much real time as possible. Anyway, what I did here is basically I just put these 2D hoplites with a looping animation on it next to each other and then parented them to this empty object here, which I animated forward. Pretty simple, and it worked very well in the shot. By the way, if you want to learn how I've made these soldiers and how I rendered them, I have that info in the Patreon exclusive behind the scenes video, so consider going there and maybe supporting the project. I'd be, of course, eternally grateful for that. When it comes to the environment, there are several types of assets I used. First, there's the rocky ground, which again I put together by using Megascans assets from the company called Quixel. Definitely check those ones. They are simply perfect for these real-time scenes because they come in several levels of details, and you have beautifully detailed texture maps for all of them. You simply plug in the diffuse color, the roughness map, and set up your normal map here, and that's it. You have a great base for your environments. Second, I created my own model of the gate. This one was based on a model from Assassin's Creed Odyssey, where I found one of the gates that the Athenian army probably used when leaving for the Battle of Marathon, and I pretty much remade it myself in Blender. I also read a bit about the ancient gates in this Ancient Greek Fortifications book by Osprey Publishing. And I mustn't forget, I got inspired by this old teaser, actually the very first teaser for World of Warcraft. It took me only like 15 years to be able to achieve shots like Blizzard used to do back then. But hey, can't complain. In Blender, I made a fairly simple model, and then I of course textured it in Substance Painter. I used this coastline stone wall mixed material that I got at Substance Source right here. I put together several layers of it, and then I put a bit of dirt on it, using the particle brushes for masking out an effect like rain. You can actually watch the first behind the scenes video for the trireme shot to see how I did it on the lighthouse model. I also used the Planks White rustic material, again from Substance Source, and I used it for the wooden parts. I made some darker copies of the material and mixed them together using custom masks with some dirt on top. In a separate file, I also textured the door model using wood walnut, which is default substance material for the wooden parts, and some metal for the reinforced parts. You can follow along with creating a metal material like this in the Architectural Asset course, which is free on my YouTube channel. Alright, back in Blender, I put the gate on its place. I animated the door opening by just adding 2 keyframes to the Z rotation, and then I continued with the rest of the environment. The lions, I actually bought those on CG Trader from a talented artist Roman Roshenko, or Double Agent 2005 as his profile is called there. I textured them with my own bronze material in Substance Painter. Again, you can see me creating a basic bronze material in the architectural course. Links are of course in the description. I also purchased some generic ancient buildings, which are more Roman than Greek, but I figured nobody would notice. My historically correct building assets for the short film are not ready yet, but they will be, hopefully soon, so I can start working with my own assets. I also used the model of the Athenian Acropolis back here, which I got from BlendSwap actually. And oh, look here, there's a second Acropolis here, which makes absolutely no sense, other than that it worked better composition-wise. If you watched the first part of this behind the scenes series, you know how I set up my volumetric fog here using the principled volume shader on a cube. I actually used a very low density value here so that I could achieve a bit of light streaks effect, and I also added some emission so that the fog is slightly thicker and lighter, emitting light itself. Of course, for it to work, I had to check this volumetric option here. I also used a sky image texture with some emission mixed in. Again, I used some photos from the Dusk and Dawn gallery from PhotoBash, and then I used the image plane importer add-on to simply add the image into my scene. By default, the image is imported with the transparency mixed in, which you can see here, but I also added one more mix shader to the mix. And I plugged in emission shader. In this shader's color socket, I plugged in the sky image so that it would start emitting some light based on its color. And of course, I used some Pro Lighting Skies textures for the environment background texture. You can learn more about that in the first part of this behind the scenes series. For the lighting setup, I used several spotlights. Let's turn them off here and have a look at it. First, I added this light illuminating the inside of my gate. Because the light is placed inside the volumetric object, we can actually see the light source. But it doesn't really matter here because it works well as a sun. So I used it and then added more lights from that direction to make the foreground pop a little. So first it was this spotlight that added more lighting to towers as well as this ground here. And since I also wanted some more rim on the lions, I duplicated one more light and actually put it behind the opening doors and aimed it slightly higher. The light from the sun would actually never hit the lions in the real world, but hey, this is CGI, we can fake stuff. Also, don't forget you can use this distance value to set how far your light will shine, which is especially useful in these cases where you want your light to only hit objects you want illuminated, in my case just these lions. The last 2 lights I made slightly less intense and in the color of the sky, and then I pointed them at the lions from the front to make them slightly more visible. Alright, and with that, I just activated the ambient occlusion option, added some screen space reflections, baked the indirect lighting, and I started rendering, this time with just 64 rendering samples, which proved to be quite enough. For the rendering setup, again, you can have a look at the other videos in the series. Finally, when all was rendered, this one actually took just 20 minutes, I put the beauty pass and the depth pass into the After Effects and added some more effects to spice things up a bit. So first, I wanted these lions to be a bit brighter, so I added an adjustment layer and on it curves effect with slightly raised curve like this. I then put my Z depth pass above this adjustment layer and put it into Luma inverted mode. That basically means that anything that's black on my footage is going to be affected, while anything bright will not. That's what enabled me to make just this foreground a bit brighter. I then added my favorite atmosphere footage from the action movie Essentials 2, and I continued with optical flares effect. After that, Red Giant Trap Coat Shine with some low opacity and the source point set to the sun's location. I have this particle footage from a video channel called Free Stock Footage. I put it in screen mode over my shot and I actually duplicated this layer. The first one I masked out so that it appears only in this region, illuminated by the sun. The second layer I masked out smaller so that it gets more intense only in this region directly over the opening gate. This is how particles like these are actually viewed by a camera. They are the brightest on the spots where the light is most intense. I then added simple camera lens blur with a radius of 5 and masked out just this region down here. I could have used the Z-Pass for that, but often masking out something is the easiest solution, especially in this case when blurring out ground directly in front of the camera. I used Colorista for some coloring and finally added one more adjustment layer with the grain effect, again set to be the most intense in shadows and least intense in highlights. Also, I made it smaller in size and overall less intense. And that's it for this shot. In the end, it was pretty simple to make, pretty fast to render, and it was also the last shot I actually made for the teaser, which is not important at all, just a fun fact to finish off this video. So my friends, stay tuned for more videos and tutorials like these. I'll be dissecting more of my assets and scenes, and also if you want to support this project, you can have a look at my Patreon profile and see if some of the rewards there are to your liking. As I've mentioned, there's already another video like this there, available for the Hypaspis tier and above, showing you how I put together this shot from the Heroes of Bronze teaser. Anyway, I hope to hear from you soon, and until next time, Martin out.